I want to bring back into the conversation my friend and colleague, senior MSNBC White House correspondent Vaughn Hillyard. Because I know you, I know that while you were quickly making your way to a camera, you were also doing reporting. Just tell us what you're learning.
I know that at this point, Nicole, I think that Washington, D.C. has effectively come to a halt. This is a moment where Charlie Kirk is somebody who had ingratiated himself across not just this White House and this administration, but up on Capitol Hill and in state races around the country. For anybody that is in and around MAGA politics, which is effectively today's Republican Party, you will have come across Charlie Kirk. This is somebody who, for the last decade and plus, he started his organization, Turning Point USA, back in 2012. It really kind of became a bigger organization back in 2016 when it latched on to the then insurgent Trump campaign, and it ultimately led to what it is today. This is a 31-year-old who is now deceased and been killed. Charlie Kirk is somebody who had struck up close relationships and friendships with people that in the White House. And of course, the President of the United States, J.D. Vance, was somebody who was also a close friend. Charlie Kirk was there traveling with him day to day in the final days of his primary campaign back in May of 2022. He had struck up a close friendship with Don Jr. He had struck up a close friendship with other key officials inside of this White House. And so in many ways, while he didn't work directly in the government, he was somebody who had pushed the Republican Party into making a MAGA future beyond even Donald Trump. Somebody who back in 2023, early 2023, I was in California at an RNC meeting, and he was the one that was trying to rally for the ouster of Ronna McDaniel as RNC chair. Somebody who effectively was trying to push this next generation to ensure that the party stuck to its MAGA accords. And again, I come back to the friendship part of this here, because when we're talking about our politics, Nicole, and in conversations that I've had over the years about Charlie Kirk, he is somebody who is eager to engage with people and debate them, and that is what he was doing on that university campus here today, welcoming people to a microphone to go toe-to-toe with him. And I think that this is not a conversation about the actual words, but it's about the mere presence of the words and the ability of Charlie Kirk to have a podcast, to have a place on television airwaves, and to go and onto college campuses and engage in that way. That is what we are talking about here today, and that was taken from this from the country. And I don't know what these days ahead look like. I was on a plane with Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They went on a quick day trip to Chicago for an event, and both of these individuals had struck up relationships with him in previous years. The Attorney General considered him a close friend, and so in many ways, this is a human story of loss of somebody that people in our politics considered to be a close friend. And also, I think when we're talking about the politics of what Charlie Kirk represented, he was somebody in the Republican Party that tried to lift up youth conservative voices and tried to position that as the future. And so this is one where I think that in the days ahead, we will see a very quiet White House, and especially up even on Capitol Hill, Republican lawmakers came to know Charlie Kirk. And so in a lot of ways, you know, I think we've compared Steve Bannon to a Rush Limbaugh figure because Charlie Kirk was more of an activist type. I don't know if that's the right comparison, but Charlie Kirk, if anybody was running or worked in Republican politics over the last several years, they will have worked with or had befriended Charlie Kirk along the way.
Let me ask you, Vaughn, about the statements that I think came in while you were making your way to a camera for us. Former President Joe Biden and former Vice President and Democratic nominee Kamala Harris both strongly condemning this act of political violence that took the life of Charlie Kirk. He obviously advocated for some of the most sort of extreme policies and characteristics, both substantively and temperamentally, inside the MAGA movement. But it seems significant and important that the last two standard bearers to the Democratic Party are among the first people, along with California Governor Gavin Newsom, to condemn this act as vile and disgusting. And I don't want to play a game of looking back for the timestamp on when the condemnations came in for the attack against Paul Pelosi. I believe they were not quite as clear and not quite as quick. But this does feel like a moment where people recognize this is unsustainable. The assassination earlier this summer of a Democratic leader in the state of Minnesota, the shooting of another, the 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life, the hammer assault against Paul Pelosi. Is there any sense among your sources and the people you're talking to that this is some sort of breaking point or tipping point in terms of coming out publicly and condemning political violence in all forms against all victims?
I think it's too early for that, Nicole. I would hope so. I think objectively, as a journalist and as an American, I think that I can say that. But I think that at the same time, right, another one was the conspiracy to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer back in 2020. And this is a moment where I think you're looking at what is a grotesque action taken in an effort to silence political discourse. And as you noted, there is a substantive conversation to be had about what the discourse here in this country looks like. But the mere fact that discourse can exist in this country, I think, is imperative. You mentioned Gavin Newsom, the California governor. He received some pushback and from Democrats. He started a podcast and had Charlie Kirk on his podcast, and the two men went back and forth. And there was an argument over whether Gavin Newsom was elevating the voice of Charlie Kirk and whether that was helpful to the Democratic Party and their efforts. And there was pushback that Gavin Newsom made that it is that type of discourse with somebody who has a mass following, like Charlie Kirk, somebody who, whether you like it or not, had built an organization at the age of 31 that amassed hundreds of millions of dollars, and it effectively built a political machine that was very influential in American politics. And Gavin Newsom defended the decision to have him on his podcast so the two could debate the substance of those very issues. In many ways, we have seen, voices like his leave, just the television platform space, but podcast space. And in many ways, I think that we are in this moment of watching political violence take the lives of too many, and also a reckoning with how and what discourse is allowed to look like, because there are those that are seeking to put a stop to it. People that take the life of Charlie Kirk, people that take the life of Melissa Hortman, people that go and shoot the likes of Gabby Giffords, people that go and beat Paul Pelosi. This is a moment where I think that the country really must have a deep look at itself. And as a journalist, it is hard not to look at our politics and go to these events and celebrate the fact that we have the ability to cover political campaign events today. And I fear that the direction of where we go in the days and the weeks and the years ahead, that somehow as a consequence of today's killing and those political violence acts before, will ultimately limit this country's ability to engage and for people to go out readily to protest, to celebrate, and to campaign. As a journalist, that is something that we cover on a day-to-day basis. We go and talk to people about their opinions and try to convince them to share them on camera. And the worst thing that could happen is that that is limited. But today's action undoubtedly only diminishes this country's ability to freely engage in free speech here ahead.